Auburn's athletic director says the Tigers are determined to do things the right way. Never mind that Auburn's recruiting class currently ranks last in the SEC. Have patience, athletic director John Cohen says. And his words echo the sentiments of Coach Hugh Freeze. But should Auburn fans be worried that doing things the right way and calls for patience are the battle cry of the losing program? Welcome into this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. Today we're going to take a look under the hood at Auburn, where Hugh Freeze's offseason golf handicap looks better than his recruiting class. John, you've been a staunch believer in Hugh Freeze at Auburn, and I'm wondering, do these recent comments from Hugh about doing things the right way, and others are going about the House settlement in a different way than Auburn, and then John Cohen, the athletic director, backing it up and talking about doing things the right way and having patience, do that cause you any reason for alarm? Like I said, I know you've kind of stayed the course with Hugh at Auburn in the past, so I thought you'd be kind of a fair source to evaluate just what should the level of concern be here in the aftermath of some of this offseason, this summertime commentary.
That Hugh Freeze bandwagon I was on
Uh-huh.
is not now so far out of my vision. I can't even make out the license tag on it. I'm off that. When I hear a coach talking about doing the things the right way, that's a cry from the basement of the league. That's something you expect to hear from Vanderbilt. He might as well have said, "Yeah, but our academics are up." Oh, that's a death knell. I mean, fans would rather hear that their quarterback's been injured than to hear we're doing the things the right way. Doing things the right way has never worked especially well in the SEC.
Yeah, and if you look into Hugh Freeze's past, his career pinnacle occurred when his staff was doing things the wrong way at Ole Miss. So that doesn't really mesh with his track record of success. But the brass tacks of it right now are Auburn ranks last in the SEC in the recruiting rankings for 2026 in the 24/7 Sports Composite. It's not just quality; it's also quantity. As we record this, Auburn has just 7 commitments to that 2026 class, which is the fewest in the conference. And it's not that these 7 commitments they have are all 4- and 5-star guys. Most of them are 3-star guys, which Auburn at its peak was not making its living off 3-star recruits. And adding to the matter, Auburn, a couple of the 4-star commitments that they did have decommitted in recent weeks. And so when asked about this by local media, Hugh Freeze said, quote, "We're going by what we believe to be an accurate interpretation of it." And what he's talking about there is an interpretation of the House lawsuit settlement that sets some new parameters around NIL and revenue sharing. Freeze continued, quote, "It's not really to our advantage what we're doing right now, because others, I think, are operating in a different manner," end quote. And as I said, John Cohen, his athletic director, later emphasized that Auburn's doing things, quote, the right way. And Cohen hinted at maybe some brighter days for recruiting come August and reminded us that signing day is not till December. And I think point taken on that front. Too many times there's a little bit of early panic about a recruiting class. I wouldn't call it early at this point, but especially if it happens in the spring, I think that's a little too early. But even now, there is time for Auburn to close the gap, to play catch up. Plenty of time to move up the rankings. But I do still bristle at the words "doing things the right way." I mean, like you said, those are things that you hear from a program like Auburn that hasn't had a winning season since it fired Gus Malzahn.
That's hard to believe when you think about it, because Auburn seems to do pretty well in the NIL department, even when there wasn't an NIL department. And but yeah, I mean, I think you get my drift there. I Yeah, that's astonishing to me to even say that. There's plenty of time to catch up. And let's face it, recruits now are more apt to flip their commitments. That's more the norm than the exception. So you can make all this up fast and you do it with NIL money. But if I'm an NIL giver for the Auburn Tigers, I don't want to hear we're doing things the right way and that might put us at a disadvantage. I don't want to hear that. I, I want to hear we're going to do whatever it takes in this era to win. That's what we're going to do. We're not worried about the other teams in the league. We're just worried about Auburn, and we're going to do whatever it takes. And that's what NIL folks that are contributing want to hear. And Hugh Freeze, my gosh, that's another reason I'm off the bandwagon, the Hugh Freeze bandwagon. Because if anyone should understand this, it's Hugh Freeze. As you pointed out, he didn't necessarily succeed at Ole Miss by putting himself at a disadvantage by following the straight and narrow path. No, he was he was obliterating that NCAA rule book, and that's how you do it in the FCC. That's what works. That's what leads to winning. You just shouldn't get caught. See Jeremy Pruitt for details. But Hugh Freeze, he knows what this league is about. He knows what boosters are about. He knows what the NIL is about. That sounds like something a first year coach might say. So that makes me wonder, how invested is Hugh Freeze right now?
Yeah, it's really astonishing to hear a sitting head coach say on the record, "quote It's not really to our advantage what we're doing right now." I mean that is an astonishing line, and it makes you think. Well, then why are you doing it? Who are you afraid of? You know, if you're coloring in the gray, who's going to come kicking down your door at this point? I mean, the
Exactly.
NCAA, that's a joke. The
Oh,
NCAA is a
yeah.
punchline. Deloitte, the accounting firm that's supposed to be ferreting out, these NIL deals as to what's a real NIL deal, what's a market value NIL deal versus what's not. I mean, give me a break. Good luck with that, Deloitte. I mean, we've seen these clearing houses before and their efforts to clean up the sport, referee the sport. Yeah, they don't go so well, and they didn't go so well back in a day when the NCAA actually had a little bit more power than I think it does now. So, I mean, what is the point of putting yourself at a disadvantage?
There's yeah, excuse me, Blake, but there's more of a chance of your star player getting deported than it is of an NCAA investigator lassoing him and bringing him into justice. It's just not happening. Those days are long gone. And at Ole Miss, Hugh Freeze wasn't really worried about the NCAA investigators there either. Back way before NIL and the transfer portal were hot items. So, gosh, the first thing, and we had this discussion. We were talking about it. The first thing that came to mind when you were bringing this up was I felt like Hugh Freeze is the next Jimbo Fisher. I feel, and unfortunately, Hugh Freeze he got a cancer diagnosis with prostate cancer, and he's had to battle that. He seems to be doing okay. I just wonder, though, if you hear the word cancer and mortality follows closely behind in the thought process. And I just wonder if he's thinking, man, I've had a really nice career. I've won a lot of games, got plenty of money, and I kind of need to enjoy what life I have left. Maybe improve my golf game some.
Yeah, that is a fair point, John, about the cancer diagnosis. I mean, we can talk about all this stuff in recruiting. Those are football matters. We shouldn't trivialize the real life matters that Hugh Freeze is dealing with. And it was good that a couple months ago Hugh told reporters in Alabama that tests indicated that his cancer is low aggressive. So, I think it's notable, or it's worthwhile that you bring that up. But yeah, on the recruiting front, I mean, um, this is not the way you take advantage of the moment right now when you're Auburn. I mean, that was the thought, right? When Nick Saban retired, just kind of suddenly. I don't think it was sudden for Nick, but he really, I think, shocked some people in college football, even though they shouldn't have been shocked when Nick Saban retired a year and a half ago. That was seen as a moment of opportunity, I think, for Auburn, right? I mean, you had Kirby still going strong, your other rival at Georgia. LSU with Brian Kelly, they weren't going to fall off a cliff or anything, but this was the moment where your in-state rival was transitioning away from the irreplaceable, the coach who cannot be imitated. This was Auburn's moment to pounce, and it just feels like they're kind of frittering this moment away, and that they haven't pounced because it's not just that Auburn ranks last in the SEC right now in recruiting. It's that Alabama's been recruiting pretty well. It's not number one in the rankings, but that's in part because quantity, it doesn't quite have the quantity that others have. But if you're just looking at in terms of 5-star guys, Alabama has more 5-stars committed to its 2026 recruiting class. This current recruiting class has more 5-stars committed than any other program. So, and it's in the top 5 overall in recruiting rankings. So, and that's what you're compared to, fair or unfair. When you're at Auburn, it's always going to be relevant what Alabama's doing and vice versa, right? I mean, what you're doing as compared to them on the field, and what you're doing as compared to them on the trail. And one of the advantages after Nick Saban retired that people wondered if Auburn might gain was Hugh Freeze is a Southern boy. He knows his way around SEC recruiting terrain. He knows his way around the booster space. And then here you got this Yankee coming into Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, a Midwest native, and well, I mean, might as well be South Canada native from South Dakota, right? Who spent none of his career up until getting hired by Alabama. Had spent no time coaching in SEC terrain. That was seen as this should be a great advantage for Auburn, right? You got Hugh Freeze, been there, done that, knows the SEC in and out, versus this SEC newcomer. And Alabama wins on the field last year, even in a down year for Alabama. Alabama wins the Iron Bowl on the field. And now not only are they beating Auburn in recruiting, they're lapping them at this juncture in recruiting. And again, important to say, still 5 months till signing day. A lot can happen between now and then. Auburn's recruiting class was pretty solid last year, and that's why there was still some optimism around the Hugh Freeze tenure, even though he'd had back-to-back losing seasons to start his campaign at Auburn. He had recruited well up to this point. But now, if the commitments stop rolling in and you're coming off back-to-back recruiting seasons, it's like, what can you really point to sow optimism?
This league is so competitive. It's crucial that you have a sense of urgency. And when opportunity knocks, you better race to the door, as you know, a 4.340. You've got to capitalize. And any time there's a coaching transition, particularly one of the magnitude of Nick Saban retiring, and we both said oftentimes we believe in Kalen DeBoer. He thinks he's a really good coach. His track record speaks for itself. Nonetheless, this is an epic transition because you're going from a guy perceived to be the greatest college football coach of all time to somebody else. And Alabama football has been so good. It's even been better under Nick Saban than it was under Bear Bryant. And that's saying a lot, but it has been. So this Auburn needed to capitalize on that. Even if Kalen DeBoer is going to do a good job, there's still got to be a little, it's a little bit shaky ground making that transition. He's new to the SEC. As you pointed out, Hugh Freeze, he knows how the SEC works. He knows what you need to do with advantages, and he knows how you need to avoid disadvantages. This isn't working out well for Auburn. And as you said, it can all change, but just the mere fact that Hugh Freeze would even bring that up, would even admit to that disadvantage, that's a damning word.
Yeah, and SEC media days don't really matter in the in the grand scheme of things anymore, John. I don't know if they ever did, but to the extent they mattered a lot less now. But we're about a week away from Hugh Freeze taking the stage at SEC media days, and I think it's important for him to sort of change the narrative around this discussion. I mean, maybe his comments got away from him. I don't think his AD did him any favors by using the phrase "doing things the right way." But SEC media days, this is I mean, you can if nobody asks you about it, you can force this topic to come up. I mean, you know how it works at SEC media days, John. You start with an opening statement before you get to questions. If I'm Hugh Freeze, I'm changing the narrative on this right from the jump and touting some strong times in recruiting coming and saying we don't ask for much patience because we got them lined up and you're gonna see, and then you got to go out and back up your words and deliver on those commitments, right? But there can be no more talk of doing things the right way and being at a disadvantage. I think he needs to change the narrative on that quickly, and this is an opportunity to do that when all the television cameras arrive and he's on stage next week at SEC Media Days.
Yeah, don't wait for a question. Just bring it up yourself. Don't let a questioner bring it up. Put it out there and give context to it. And you know, he knows how to do this. That's what's striking to me. But he knows how to work a room. He knows how to work the media. He knows how to work boosters. Well, now he's got to do it. And as much as anybody, he knows what his track record at Auburn looks like right now. And if you're on the hot seat, there's no point in poor mouthing or making excuses. You just say, we're going to be a lot better this year. That, I think, needs to be his narrative. Forget recruiting. We're in the middle of recruiting, yeah, and we're going to do better down the stretch. Better days are coming in recruiting, I guarantee you. But then also, segue into this season, we did the work we needed to do this offseason. We're not looking to a recruiting class of 2026. We're focused on 2025 football season. And he should be, because if things don't go well this football season, he won't be back for the 2026 recruiting class, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think he needs to change the narrative around recruiting, but you're so right. Don't just stop at recruiting. I mean, you might as well guarantee greatness this year because, to your point, on the heels of back-to-back losing seasons at Auburn, he doesn't turn it around this year. He ain't going to be back at SEC Media Days next year to fine-tune the message. So there's no point in bringing up patience or promising better days in 2026 and beyond. No, you might as well just, promise the world in 2025 because you need to achieve. You may not have to hand him the world, but you're going to have to hand him something better than a third straight losing season. And so you're absolutely right that you change the narrative about recruiting, but you change the narrative by saying you're not going to have to wait till that December signing class to see some brighter days at Auburn. You're gonna see it when the season kicks off against Baylor in week 1. So good point on that. And I think something else you raised, John, that is incredibly relevant. And I hadn't thought about this, but you're so spot on to bring up Jimbo Fisher. I think because I think if the Hugh Freeze era does not revive at Auburn and this thing ends in a firing, I think there'll be a lot of comparisons to Brian Harsin, and well, he wasn't any better than Brian Harsin, but I don't really think that's an apt comparison. They would have failed, I think, for different reasons, Brian Harsin and Hugh Freeze. It's just that one would have come after the other. But I think the Jimbo Fisher comparison is much more spot on because this was sort of the scenario when Hugh Freeze came to Auburn, we thought this guy he knows the terrain. He's proven himself. Not only as a head coach, he's proven himself in the SEC. He knows the ins and outs. He's still young enough to get it done. This is not someone, in the twilight of his career when Auburn hired him. He was in his early 50s. He's a man that can go there, knows what he's doing, and get it done. I mean, that's what I think most of us, myself included, were thinking when Texas A&M hired Jimbo Fisher. I mean, yes, it did not end great for Jimbo at Florida State, but throughout the vast majority of that tenure, Jimbo had it going at Florida State, including a national championship. And although Florida State was not in the SEC, it's very comparable to being at an SEC school. And also, he'd worked in the SEC under Nick Saban at LSU. He'd had a stop in Auburn. He knew the terrain. It just seemed like a slam dunk, but he could not revive what he'd had at his peak at Florida State. And whether his fire and desire had just sort of flickered out, whether the game had just kind of passed him by, I don't know. But it feels like that is sort of the comparison with Hugh Freeze. I don't know if his fire and desire is just not what it was at one point, or if what made him great a decade ago is just not quite as relevant anymore. But it does feel like your comparison to Jimbo is fair game, and I think in the ballpark.
Well, I really thought Jimbo would win a national championship at Texas A&M. I just
and
think,
so did they.
Yeah,
they handed him the plaque when he was hired, right?
They paid him national championship wagers, and I just think you can't. As gifted as we are on this podcast, we can't read minds, and we didn't know what was going on with Jimbo. And maybe I misread Hugh Freeze, because I looked at Hugh Freeze as a coach who always wanted to coach in the SEC. Finally got that chance with Ole Miss. Has success there. Beats Alabama in back-to-back seasons when Nick Saban was the coach. Then things go south. NCAA issues. Everything falls apart. He's out the door. Well, he goes to Liberty, has success there. But I'm thinking this guy, his goal now is he knows what it takes to win in the SEC. He proved he could do it that season at Ole Miss. And he proved it when he beat Nick Saban 2 straight times. So he's thinking, man, I'd give anything to get another chance to finish what I started at Ole Miss at another SEC school. I know I can do it. So I envision him as having all this motivation. Second chance guy. I'll show you. Okay, here I come. I'm back. But that's not what we're seeing. And now it's been a short term. It's been a short term, certainly at Auburn. But Hugh Freeze has been a quarterback guy. You think of him as having developing quarterbacks, winning with the kind of quarterback he had. And he really didn't have that kind of quarterback at Auburn. And why didn't he get one before last season? See that just, I mean, he has to know who this guy, Peyton Thorne, he has to know who this guy is, what he can do. And he has to know, I mean, Bo Wallace wasn't a national championship quarterback, but he was really pretty good in Hugh Freeze's offense at Ole Miss. And he knows what you need at quarterback. That's why I'm thinking, why did he think things would go well with this quarterback? He knew he would have to know he needed an upgrade. So these are all questions that come to mind now about Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and he had the wrong quarterback last year. That's on Hugh. I also think, John, back when he had it humming at Ole Miss, Hugh was an innovative offensive mind. He brought RPOs to the SEC at a much higher level. He was he was at the vanguard of bringing tempo to the SEC. Now everybody's running some level of RPOs. Now not everybody, but close to everybody runs some degree of tempo, things that were sort of revolutionary, to his credit, a decade or a dozen years ago. He kind of helped change the game in the SEC, and now everybody else is not only caught up, but some of them are doing more revolutionary things than what I think Hugh is doing with his offense. So I think part of it was personnel, as you said, and part of it was like sort of the X's and O's wizardry. Well, it's not wizardry anymore. It's just sort of normal. You don't have to be a wizard to run an RPO. But I do think personnel-wise, Auburn has improved, right? And that's why, even though this is drawing headlines, part of the reason it's drawing headlines is because it's July and we're still 6 weeks out from the season starting. And so these are the types of things you focus on this time of year. Let's face it. When you work in the 24/7, 365 business of college football media, when a coach talks about being at a disadvantage and your AD talks about doing things the right ways and you're last in recruiting things, in recruiting rankings, this makes headlines in July. But when you put that aside, I do think Auburn's personnel is in the best shape it's been in the Hugh Freeze tenure. Heck, it's probably in the best shape it's been since Gus Malzahn was on the sidelines. And so you can quiet this down real quick by going out and winning some ball games once the season starts. And you win some ball games, that's probably going to help you on the recruiting front as well. I know it's a very transactional world in recruiting, as transactional as ever, but it doesn't hurt when you go out and start winning some games too. That helps you on the finances front. And I think still there are some young kids out there who would rather play for a winner than a loser if they have the option.
I also another problem that could develop too is when you go into a season without momentum. As you said, this is just rhetoric. It doesn't mean anything once the season starts. However, when you couple the rhetoric with what's going on with Auburn in the first half of the season, Auburn plays at Baylor, at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, and then gets Georgia at home. That's in the first half of the season. Why it's scheduled has a game at Baylor, I don't know, because Baylor finished strong last season and it is in pretty good shape coming into
yeah,
season.
That's a no upside game for Auburn. You lose that one, and everybody's going to be coming out with the pitchforks for Hugh Freeze. If you win that one, I don't know that it really moves the needle enough, in an at-large playoff situation to justify the risk of playing Baylor on the road. You're right. Look, you know the way I feel, and you feel similarly about enough of these cupcake games. So in the larger sense, the 10,000-foot sense, I like that Auburn's playing a relevant game in week one. But in terms of protecting your coach, this is not who I would want to be playing on the road in week one.
Yeah, I also think an SEC team playing a pretty good Big 12 team. There are a lot of pretty good Big 12 teams in that league. There are a lot of good teams in that conference. Maybe not great teams, but a lot of pretty good ones. I think it's just a crapshoot who's going to win that conference. We saw Arizona State last year pick to finish at the bottom, won the conference championship. So there's a lot of parity there. But a win over Baylor won't resonate with Auburn fans. Auburn fans say, well, you're supposed to beat Baylor. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen an opening line on that, but I would say it's a toss-up game right now. Maybe Baylor'd be a 1 or 2 point favorite playing at home. I don't see that. That's not a game that is certainly not a sure thing. On the other hand, it's not playing at Ohio State like Texas is doing, or playing at Clemson like LSU's doing. If you lose those games, people say, well, you're not supposed to win at Clemson. You're not supposed to win at Ohio State, and you can bounce back from it. But losing at Baylor, and then you're going to play what should be a much improved Oklahoma team early in the year and follow that back-to-back road games with A&M, which can be kind of in that scrambled, jumbled up middle of the SEC, and could end up winning 9 games. I don't know, but it's got some talent. So that's tough sledding for Auburn, and it's got to come out. It's got to come out of the gate really fast, really hard.
Yeah, the betting line on that is at least at one sports book, John. Auburn 2.5 point favorite on the road at Baylor, so pretty razor thin there. And I think that speaks to your point. And Baylor, by the way, has a much more proven quarterback than what Auburn has. Auburn
Mhm.
getting the transfer from Oklahoma didn't pan out at Oklahoma for Jackson Arnold, looking to kind of jumpstart his career at Auburn. Well, Baylor's got a proven guy in Sawyer Robertson, who over at usatoday.com, we got our top 25 quarterback rankings in the nation. We collectively put Sawyer Robertson at number 11 in those top 25 rankings from Baylor, and Jackson Arnold was not in our top 25 rankings. So, yeah, I'd be feeling a little bit uncomfortable as at Auburn 2.5 point favorite opening up on the road. But John, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking another factor in this, a Big 12, pretty good Big 12 team playing at home against an SEC team. I think other teams, other schools outside the conference will raise their game against the SEC. And now sometimes that raising their game might not matter, but I think for a team like Baylor, it could matter because it means so much. The SEC has set itself up, along with the Big Ten, as being superior to the other Power Four conferences. That's just the way it is. And these other schools just keep hearing that. If Auburn had the same team and it wasn't from the SEC, it might have a better chance of winning that game. I just think it will get Baylor's best shot, whatever that might be.
And I want to raise this next point in the general sense. I'm not saying this about Hugh Freeze specifically because, in truth, I don't know whether this does or doesn't apply to him. But in the general sense, I do sometimes wonder whether the coaches who got a certain thrill out of operating in the old way of college football, recruiting under the table, little bit, living in the gray, maybe having a bag man with some money in a fast food parking lot, like a former Tennessee coach was found to do. The thrill of that, the mastery of that, living in that space and showing you can thrive in that world. I wonder now that things are a little bit more above the table. Everybody knows it's pay to play in college football now. It's very transactional. There's uh, no real bag men necessary, or in so much as they exist, they don't have to hide their handouts and greasy fast food bags. I just wonder if, like, for some coaches, do you think sort of like the thrill is gone, and what they loved about kind of operating in the gray and having a bag man take that greasy fast food bag of cash and meet up with a prospect in a parking lot, or a prospect's handler in a parking lot. If that thrill and that advantage is kind of gone now, and everything's above the table, and you're dealing with agents, and you're dealing with collectives, and you're at the mercy now more than ever of your boosters, and players have more power than ever, and it's closer to the pros than it was before. I just wonder if that's just not for some people in the way that the old landscape was.
I think that's a really valid take because I think in the old days, it was almost, they didn't look at it as cheating. They look at it as gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, I'm going to outfox you. I'm going to trick you, just like they might try running a flea flicker play or swinging gate play. We're going to outsmart those guys. Okay. We won't use McDonald bags. We'll use just a brown paper bag, whatever. Yeah, I think there's something to that because and the other thing, they were in control, and football coaches thrive on control. They were in control. Now it's as though, doesn't matter how crafty they are, it's this corporate type bureaucracy over here with a general manager. Some schools call him that, others don't give him that title. But the general manager, the NIL boosters, all that stuff, that's out of your control. I mean, you don't get credit just because one of your boosters is a billionaire. That yeah, you can't put that on your resume. So whereas in the old days, how are we going to get this money to that recruit in the NCAA, which had some teeth back then, without the NCAA noticing? Without we got to get away with it. How are we going to pull off this trick play? Put some thought in, get creative. You don't have that now. It's out of their control, and I think that bothers coaches a lot. That doesn't matter what they do. If this NIL guy doesn't come up with the money, I don't know if you're going to get the 5-star you're looking for.
All right, John, I want to leave this topic behind and get to one more. As media days are happening this month and conference commissioners kind of finish up their final preseason tours with the press, we're getting a lot of commentary about the ongoing negotiations for the 2026 playoff format. As we know, that's sort of at an impasse right now. Conferences disagree on what they want. Each individual conference kind of has their own priorities. And Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten, who very rarely does interviews, as much as Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, he's out there in front of the press and he takes his licks. Sometimes he's taken his licks from you and I on this show and in our written columns. But you have to say, Greg Sankey is out there. He's taking the bullets. He's meeting with the press pretty regularly. Tony Petitti, it's fairly rare that he does interviews. But recently, he sat down with Joel Klatt of Fox Sports, big media partner, as we know, with the Big Ten, and gave one of these rare interviews. And Tony Petitti stumped for the auto bid playoff plan that the Big Ten prefers. We've discussed it at length, but as a reminder, that would preordain the Big Ten and the SEC getting 4 auto bids apiece, the ACC and the Big 12 getting 2 apiece, 1 going to the next best conference champion, and leaving just 3 at-large bids available in a 16-team field. And there were a lot of the usual points that we've already discussed previously on the pod that Tony Petitti talked about for why he wants this plan. Neither you nor I like this plan. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, John, is this idea that Tony Petitti has of reducing the role of the selection committee. That's one thing he says this auto bid plan would be an advantage of it. Is you only leave 3 spots for the selection committee to address, and so you take so much more out of their hands and put it more on conference standings and play-in games. Now, this would be a 180 from how college sports typically operates. I mean, really in a variety of sports, we have selection committees helping determine the field for a playoff. And so my question, John, is putting Petitti's plan aside, we know neither you nor I like that. What do you think about his idea in general of sort of neutering or taking away a lot of the power of the selection committee and having the playoff selection process go to some sort of method that is more out of the hands of the committee and into something else? In Petitti's idea, it would be more in the hands of conference standings in a play-in game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would like to take power away from the selection committee. But I just don't know the automatic bid. So that still stumps me. I just have trouble with you're not earning it. You just say it's preordained. You're in. I mean, maybe that's how it should. Maybe that plays out correctly in most cases. But then there might be a year where it doesn't, where you really don't deserve 4 teams to make it. And I have a problem with that. But I do like the idea of reducing the human element in it. And the more you can have it decided on the field as opposed to in a boardroom or in a group think, I would like that, but I just don't know how it's feasible.
one of my concerns with firing or neutering the selection committee, John, is we hear so much from college administrator types and coaches about how the NFL should be a model for college football. And kicking the selection committee out would be going to more of an NFL model, right? The NFL doesn't use a selection committee to determine its playoff, but I guess I see it differently. Like, why should college football try to mimic the NFL? To me, part of the beauty of college football and part of the appeal of college football is that it functions in a lot of ways very differently from the NFL. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think you want this to be AAA football. I think so much of what makes college football great is that it's not a AAA, a mini-me version of the NFL. And the selection committee and all the debate and the drama and the controversy that surrounds that's part of what separates college football from the NFL to me. And also, the NFL is a much smaller league. Like, we're talking about 32 teams, and a lot of teams play each other. Teams in their own divisions play each other twice. I think you don't need a selection committee in that format. But when you have more than 130 teams playing for one trophy, and you don't even play in some conferences, you only play half the teams in your own conference, I think there has to be some sort of element for selecting teams that's not just based on conference standings. I mean, when you only play half the teams in your league, why should whether you get into the playoff or not come down purely to the conference standings, right? I mean, you're not even playing half the league. And so that's one thing I worry about. And I just worry about, in general, this thinking that college football needs to mimic the NFL. And I do understand why Tony Petitti kind of comes at it from that sense, because he's new to college sports, whereas most commissioners have spent many, many years coming up through the ranks of college sports. Tony Petitti came from the MLB. So he's thinking through a pro sports lens where they don't have selection committees. But I do worry about whether it be selection committees or watering down rivalries or anything else that kind of distinguishes college sports from pro sports. I worry about that. I worry about trying to make college football AAA NFL.
Well, I guess my main point is I would like to see the best teams make the playoff.
Yeah.
And how do you determine that? I don't think giving all these automatic bids to schools does that. I just look at potential outliers and some super team that might emerge from the Big 12 or from the ACC or these. We just don't know. Some unexpected team. Maybe in 1 year, the Big 12 has 4 legitimate playoff teams. You watch those teams and think they're the best. I wish there was some way we could determine that. So, yeah, I'm not in favor of his plan. I am in favor of deciding things on the field. The more we can do that, the better, however you go about it. And that's why I would prefer that the SEC go to a 9-game conference schedule as opposed to the 8-game conference schedule, even if it might be in its own best interest to do that. We talked about this a lot, but I would just like to see more conference games.
Yeah, and the other issue I had with Petitti's comments in his interview with Joel Klatt of Fox Sports, and look, I understand Tony Petitti, as he clearly said in that interview, representing the Big Ten is his job. And if he were able to get this auto bid plan across the finish line, which he's running into a lot of roadblocks in doing that, but if he were to succeed in getting this across the finish line, he's done his job, because I think this plan is really, really good for the Big Ten. So I can't really fault him at trying to do his job, but I can poke holes in what he says in defending his plan. And he was asked to explain why, before the season ever kicks off, that the Big Ten should get twice as many automatic bids as the Big 12 and the SEC. And he said, quote, because of historic strength and where we think programs are, end quote. And I just have a real problem with that. Like, deciding bids based on history. I mean, if you would have done that in March Madness last year, the ACC would have had like twice as many bids as the SEC. When we all saw during the season the SEC was the best conference in college basketball, they proved it on the court during the regular season. They deservingly got the most number of bids, and then they went out and proved it in the NCAA tournament that, oh yeah, that was true. They were the best conference. The selection committee got it right on down the line. And so that just because something has happened previously doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. And also, since the dawn of the BCS era, John, the ACC and the Big Ten has produced the same number of national champions. So I kind of have an issue with that history argument too, and just the whole nature of deciding bids based on historical norms. I mean, a point I've raised, if we're going to do this based on history, where's the bid for Yale, 18-time national champion football program, Yale? I mean, that's a joke, right? We would never give Yale a bid. They're not even eligible to compete for the FBS championship.
Yeah, and this is the wrong time to be talking about history because we're sort of in a revolutionary era of college football with NIL, transfer portal. A good example came up last week. Texas Tech doesn't have a history of being a national power, but it's just worked to deal with an offensive tackle coming out of high school for $5.1 million over the next 3 years. That tells me TCU, it can probably do the same. Texas Tech is in a position to change history, its history. You look at what it's doing in other sports. NIL money can change everything. And I don't think you can look at schools the same way. And the other aspect of this is just because you're in the SEC or just because you're in the Big Ten, that doesn't certify greatness. There's some bad teams in the leagues. It doesn't, just because your game doesn't go up just because you're in that conference. If you move the worst team in the Big 12 into the SEC, it wouldn't get better just by being in the SEC. So, yeah, I'm really opposed to the automatic qualifiers, but from those conferences, again, I just really think I want it to be open-minded. I sometimes wonder about that selection committee, if it would help to have a Vegas odds maker on that committee.
Well, now we're speaking the same language here, John, because I don't love totally dumping the selection committee, but I do think the fact that so much of the committee is made up of athletic directors and people who are directly tied to specific universities. I mean, that either has bias in practice or at the very least it has the strong appearance of bias. And while I'm not ready to fire the selection committee, I do think we need to dial down the number of ads we have or people that are so strongly attached to one specific university. There needs to be like you said, whether it's an odds, I don't know who those type of people are. Maybe you have an odds maker on there. Maybe you have the stat nerd on there who's got the computer formula for figuring out who these best teams. A nice healthy mix would be nice, right? It doesn't. I don't know that it has to be all the same type of people, but I do think let's dial down some of these sitting employees at schools that are in the hunt for playoff bids, and some of their rivals are also in the hunt for playoff bids. I mean, that just smacks of bias, or at the very least, the appearance of bias. You shouldn't want that in your playoff space.
Well, the thing I like about odds makers, they're putting money on it. They're setting a line. There's money involved here. They're not emotional. They're just, they're trying to pick the very best teams. Okay. And I wonder how differently it would look. You go back to last year and you had a 12-team field. If the odds makers had picked and seeded the teams, I wonder how different it would have looked. I don't know, but there's just something, I don't know. It's hard for me to say something pure when it involves betting, but it kind of removes bias. They don't care about the school or the conference. They care about the money. Who's the best? And I wish there was some way to include that element in the selection committee, because even if you're not biased toward a certain school, if you've spent your whole life in the SEC country or Big Ten country, how do you just throw that out the window? How do you just eliminate that from your psyche? It's there.
Fill the committee with a bunch of Canadians, John. They have odds makers in Canada. I don't know.
You don't have to go to Canada. Just go to North Dakota.
There you go. All right, you excited about SEC Media Days, John? You just itching with excitement for Media Days getting underway next week?
No, that itch is long gone, but I am excited that we're getting a little closer to football. That just kind of means you're closer to football season. Still got a ways to go, but yeah, once you get through that, teams will report shortly thereafter, and then we'll really be, once you're in August, you're really in football season, because then you're assembling your team and bringing in all the newcomers and trying to make it all work. So yeah, it's a good time of year.
All right, still a little bit of ways to go. John and I will stick with you throughout the preseason. As always, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, we'd really appreciate it. Click the subscribe button, give us a rating or review. Those rating and reviews help us find more listeners, which is important to John and I, continuing to help us reach you each and every week. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered. We'll see you next week.